Welcome to the Freedom Fridays Project podcast. I'm Pete Clark, your host, the Whispers Guy. It appears that work expands to the time that we give it, and I started to explore how I was investing my time and effort, particularly on Fridays. It's evolved to an exploration and experiment with time, energy, attention and identity, and a mindset shift from I have to I choose to. So if you're interested in exploring some changes to the way that you invest your time and your energy, if you'd like some tips on the way as you make some changes perhaps to your identity, if you would like the freedom of I choose to away from I have to, then this is the podcast for you. So welcome to the Freedom Fridays Project podcast. Welcome to this week's episode of Freedom Fridays. I've got a very dear friend of mine who, probably unbeknownst to her actually, I remember a significant coaching moment that she's one of the very few people that have helped me with that over the years. And because she doesn't even know I'm saying this, she might even ask me about it later. But it's a very dear friend of mine who I've known for a number of years in the UK. And again, because of the pandemic, we have connected again. And we're both in a very similar workspace, but we've both been jostling with what's been happening to our world. And so I'm delighted to welcome Harriet onto the show. Harriet, welcome.
Thank you very much for having me. And of course, I'm now completely intrigued as to what this coaching moment was.
Yeah, I'll share it with you either on this if it's relevant or offline.
Okay, all right.
But Harriet, I normally start this by, the premise of Freedom Fridays was choice, adding life to our years and, speaking to people, ordinary people that are doing extraordinary things. People have made big changes. How have you gone about that? What forced you? What did you choose to do? Any red flags on the way? So that's how I start it. So I'm going to open it up with that. So for you, with what you're going through or having gone through, what's the big change that you made?
Oh gosh, I think there's a number that come up for me. One that comes up is writing a book, because I'm writing another book. So it's like, how do you do that when you've got other stuff going on? And I think the other one was going from dabbling with stand-up comedy to the first show at the Edinburgh Fringe. And I'm a normal middle-aged mum, right? So this wasn't me as a young, starry-eyed whippersnapper going off to. So I think it's probably the latter, because that unlocks a lot of, if I can figure out what I did there, then I think there's lots of other changes I can make. By the way, can I also apologise? I know my sound is quiet, so listeners, my neighbours during lockdown have done a Mexican wave of building. As soon as one of them stops, the next one starts. So this is the most likely way of actually hearing me. That's cool. Look, H, if you're happy, I would love to pick up on the stand-up comedy piece. Partly because I'm intrigued by it, partly because I love having a laugh. And I know there's probably, anyone listening is probably sitting there, they'll immediately have crossed their arms and gone, come on then, make me laugh. Oh, I wouldn't even try. No, I mean, pay good money and we sit in a club, maybe. But I know that's one of the worst bits, actually. You're in Edinburgh and you're flyering. I think everyone on this planet should have to do flyering at one point in their lives. It's the most humbling experience. Explain what flyering is. Flyering is you literally are handing out flyers to your show. Oh, there are 3,000 plus shows. So you have to do everything you can to get people in. And it's soul destroying that you're there with these flyers for this show that you spent an awful lot of time and money creating. And people are either dismissive or they're actively rude. And I'm sure that they're lovely people. But then people who do engage will be like, oh, they make us laugh. It's like, this is a show about menopause. I'm not sure that a one-liner on a street is really going to sell it to you or whatever. So yeah. Well, so maybe a little bit for the listeners don't quite appreciate the Edinburgh Comedy Festival, which is what you're talking about, where you did one of your shows, or one of many, is around the world. Probably it's like the Oscars for comedians, right? It's the largest festival in the world. Yeah.
Wow. So you starred, my words, you starred at the Edinburgh Festival. That's like the World Cup for comedians, surely.
Well, yes and no, because imagine a World Cup where you can bring your own football boots and um, and stand in a dodgy park in the middle of nowhere and go, "I'm at the World Cup." So
Yeah.
it's kind of DIY World Cup.
Yeah,
Yes.
cool. I mean, I think you're playing it down a little bit. It's very impressive as far as I'm concerned. But can I pick up on just the start of that? So, when did you know you were funny?
It's a really interesting question that, because it feels a bit like saying to someone, aren't you good looking? It's one of those skills that if you say you're funny, you instantly sound like a bit of an idiot.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's a bit like, I had a friend who was very, very good looking at school. And yeah, people would try and trip her up by going, "Do you think you're good looking?" And if she said no, they went, "Ugh." And if she said yes, they went, "Ugh." So I find that a really difficult question to answer without, and that, I think, for me, is interesting about how we see ourselves and our identity. And there's a whole baggage of stuff there, right? I think as a kid, I was that classic. I was a real geek at school, very academic, and that was not cool. So if you wanted to stop, the school bully throwing peas at you in the lunch hall, you better find a way of getting them on side. And for me, it was being funny. And also in our family environment, it was highly valued. My dad's very funny. So I think I'm just trying to be my dad.
I've read a lot about, in many circumstances, comedians in particular have used humor to fit in and, to stop the bullying throwing pigs at, as you said. So do you think that's within all of us? And what do you think causes one person or another to choose humor as a way of fitting in?
I am fascinated around, we have to fit in. From an evolutionary psychology perspective, for the research I've done is, we have to fit in. In caveman days, we would have been kicked out of the tribe if we didn't fit it. We would have died. You couldn't have survived alone. So it's crucial, crucial, crucial. And laughter is a fascinating mechanism. So when there's the difference between voluntary and involuntary laughter. If you want to find out more, Dr. Sophie Scott has got an amazing TED talk. And so it's a really nuanced way of kind of social cohesion, of shared goals, of smoothing over mistakes, of it's got a lot of social value. So I don't think it's any different from any of the other social skills, building rapport, or they all intermingle. I just think I'm intrigued by why culturally it has this kind of like difference attached to it. I don't actually think it's a bit like sales, right? You say to someone, "Oh, I'm a salesman," and to some people that's an identity they want to have, and other people find that, "Oh, I don't want to be a salesman. That's really cheap and nasty." But if you unpick the skills within it, what can you build rapport? Oh, I'm up for that. Can you persuade someone? Oh, I'd be up for that. Can you add value, help someone solve their problems? I'd be up for that. So that's a very long-winded way of answering that. I think humor is actually just a composite of lots of skills we all have.
I remember when we first met, but when we first knew each other, a good friend of ours making the distinction when we're facilitating to, rather than telling jokes, having fun. And the having fun part was what connects us, as opposed to telling gags, here's the joke, right, can we move on to the serious stuff, and being willing to be playful. To what extent does that show up when you're doing your stand-up?
Oh, the best gigs are definitely the ones where you feel free and you can go anywhere. So the set that you've got is kind of your safety zone, your like safety dance, if you know what I mean. But if something else comes out, if the DJ plays something else, then you happily dance, whatever. So riffing off the audience, going off on a tangent. And I always, it's painful, but I will video myself, and I'll always look back at gigs and try and unpick what worked and what didn't and why. And you can just see it. The nights where I've died on my backside, there is this totally wooden, frozen, hesitating, you could just see versus the nights where it's gone well, where you're just like having a laugh with your mates who happen to be complete strangers in a club.
Yeah. Tell me any milestones. You've kind of gone from, as you said, a geek at school to stand-up comedy at the Edinburgh Festival.
Yeah.
If someone was trying to make a massive, because that seems like a huge leap, were there any key milestones on the way?
Yeah, for sure. So I think it is part of how I see myself that I really value being funny. I think it has massive. So some people see it as frivolous. I've got told off at work by various bosses, and fair enough. I can see that in a couple of times I've probably been distracting in meetings or something. So I think you can use it for the good or the bad, as it were. It's like any skill, you can overplay it. But I don't think we take humor seriously enough. It's such a valuable tool. So it's a big part of my identity and I value it. So that's always been there since school. And then I think it gets reinforced, right? So you get praise and it's like you get the dopamine hit when you make people laugh. So I'll have more than that. And our job is quite performance based, or can be. So as a group coach or as a trainer or as a keynote speaker, I get to do that a lot. And so it's almost like, well, let's do it in a purer form, as it were.
And so how do you get into the Edinburgh Festival? Is it literally you can rock up with your own football boots and set up a table and chair and make people laugh?
Yeah, and I think I'm a big believer in stitching yourself up. If you want to make a change, making it impossible not to. I remember there was a colleague of ours when we worked together who'd got she'd bought one of these self-assembly wardrobes, and she hated putting together that kind of stuff. So she put it at her front door. So she had to physically climb over it in order to get in and out of her house, because she knew that it would annoy her so much that eventually she'd crumble and put this bloody thing together. And I've just loved that as a metaphor for how can I make it impossible not to? How can I stitch myself up so that if I want to do this thing, I've kind of got to do this thing. So it might be signing up for something where it's embarrassing to back out, like you and I did the London Marathon about the same time. And that was just like, once you've signed up and told everyone, you just feel like such a muppet to back out. I'm a big believer in other people having accountability buddies. The only reason I'm remotely fit is having a class that I've paid for, I've booked in, and it's good fun, and I like the lady who runs it. So with comedy, I signed up for a comedy course. There was someone I knew who was doing it at the same time. And then you're on a conveyor belt, right? You just that one tiny step of going to a dodgy church hall randomly in London and messing about. And then the last module of the course is you do a gig, and then you're kind of bitten. So once I've made the decision with Edinburgh, it was mates actually. How middle-aged am I now? I'm a member of a book club. And so I was chatting to mates at book club, and they were like, do it. And I was putting all kind of obstacles in front of myself, going, but it's a lot of money, and it's a lot of time, and you've got to have a venue to pick you and all the rest of it. And there was one lady there went, that's complete nonsense. I went there as a student and put on a theatre show. And you just hands over, you find a venue, hands over your money, job's a good one. It's like, busted. So, so it's just kind of made it impossible not to. And then you find yourself up there going, okay, I appear to be at Edinburgh. I better do this thing.
And how long before you were kind of challenged to do it before the gig?
I didn't appreciate how long in advance you needed to sign up. So I missed 1 year.
Right.
If that makes sense. Went, I'll do it. And it's like, no, that's 3 months away. Everything's booked up. But then that meant I could do it the next. And I think that's another learn for me, is I'm really impatient. And I'm likely to stop doing a change because I think I've missed the boat. And that's a lesson the universe keeps teaching me, is it's probably going to take longer than you think.
Right.
It just is. And I haven't cracked that code. Maybe there's some way, I'm sure there is, of doing it faster. But so yeah, if I think about changes I'm trying to make now, oh my God, they're taking much longer than I would like them to.
Yeah. And what you mentioned, that little step that you made puts you on the conveyor belt. what keeps you on it, and what chucks you off?
I think 99% of things try and chuck you off. I mean,
because the universe is evil.
It does seem that sometimes, doesn't it? On my brighter moments, like the universe is testing you whether you really want to do it. So I think, I'm a mum, right? That's a really good excuse. Really good excuse. There's always, school clubs to ferry the little ones to, and there's brilliant excuses there. I work, paying the mortgage is a brilliant excuse. They're all reasonable excuses, right? Finding the time. So I think it's almost like 100% of things will want to chuck you off. And again, another lesson that I keep needing to learn is just because you want to do something doesn't mean it's going to happen. And there's almost a comfort in going, oh, I will do that thing. Oh, I am going to write another book. Oh, warm glow, warm fuzzy glow. And that almost, so the research that I've, read around goal setting is have the dream and then have a blooming detailed plan. And I'm not very good at detailed plans. So that's for me where accountability buddies makes a huge difference. Someone just go, next step, nag, next step. Have you done what you said you were going to do? Do you remember what you said you were going to do last week? Oh, no. Okay.
Yeah. I know that you said you continue to learn. And it picks up on a theme that I've, recognized in myself, in the clients I work with, that the learning doesn't just happen and then it's done.
Oh, I know.
Unless it's like building a house, it's a structure and you can go, I've done that, click, I can leave it. But it seems that we continue to learn the same lesson again and again and again and again.
I know.
And again.
It's so frustrating. It's like, I always agree. And it's almost depressing, on a on a good month, I will, journal and think, look at what's working, what isn't working. I don't pretend to stick at that the whole time. And it's almost depressing. You look back and go, oh, I had that learn in 2008. Great. So it's hard I do find it hard not to get dispirited by that, not gonna lie.
Yeah. You've completely turned it on its head for me again, because you said 10 minutes ago you are more likely to do something for yourself when it's impossible not to, and you kind of try and stitch yourself up, which is completely reversing the whole premise of what I started this podcast with, was what I'm going to go from I have to I choose to. And what keeps showing up is, choosing to means you're probably less likely to. All the people I've spoken to recently, they've said the same sort of thing. Well, when I have to, when it's impossible not to, that gets it across the line. Has that been your experience?
But I think it's it's an order, isn't it? Because there's a difference between, there's a difference between the kind of excuse of I have to, right? Using the phrase I have to as an excuse. Oh, I have to pay the mortgage. I have to take the kids to school, as an excuse to not write the book, go to Edinburgh, all right? If you put in front of it, I choose to, and therefore I need to do X, Y, and Z, and therefore I can't stitch myself up. That for me. So I think that choosing up front is absolutely crucial. Having the time and space, and I've been on various kind of retreats and done various courses over the years that give you that time out. Having that time out to go, what is important? What's your purpose? What's your compass bearing? How are you going to choose to spend your time and focus and energy? What do you choose as your goal? And then stitch yourself up. Because it's going to be at 3 o'clock in the morning the next day. You go, oh, blimmin' heck, what's talking about? and then also I think there's points along the way. I found the Olympics absolutely fascinating. Because only the people in question, I think, will know, when do you stop? When do you keep going? With any kind of project, any kind of goal. And I was reading an article recently about, choiceful giving up on stuff. And I look back at projects where I've chosen to let go of them. I think we should celebrate that more as well. When we don't, that always feels like a failure, and it's not. So I'm choosing to no longer do this, but it's a choiceful thing to go, I'm stepping away from this have to train. Does that make any sense at all? I'm not sure.
Yeah, I think it's very relevant. I think, if I play it out, and let's say somebody wants to make a change and they're choosing to, but stitching themselves up. And one of the ways I can stitch myself up is to do it publicly and say, hey, I'm going to do this. And then 6 months later, for whatever circumstances, that doesn't feel right. It doesn't feel like the right thing to do. I know with my pattern of reliability, I'll get something done if I say I'm going to do it. I would feel enormous guilt and shame if I then choicefully said, nah, not for me anymore.
Yeah.
I would find that really difficult.
I think I had a bit of an epiphany a couple of weeks ago with an accountability buddy, where we've both got projects that we're kind of in that, like, what are we doing phase? This is going to work. And had the revelation of, let the cake bake. You've taken it out of the oven too early. So have a review point that is a choiceful review point. Be clear on the criteria for that review. In the same way that you'd put the pinger on for 15 minutes, get the cake out of the oven, put a skewer in it and see, does it come out clean or not? What's the equivalent? So with, I don't know, writing the book or doing another Edinburgh show, I think it's, do the first draft, do the kind of, splurge of what is it, and then, but give yourself 2 months and then have a choiceful review to go, is this singing to me? Does this feel meaningful? And then the criteria are not kind of like, oh, this is a bit hard. Oh, I haven't got much time.
Yeah.
That's where you need to stitch yourself up. If it's still something you want to do, then you can choose whether to stop or go. I completely relate to that, because the reason I'm doing this podcast, for example, is I committed to doing it for a year to myself, because I'm not really expecting anything to come out of it. I'm not expecting anyone to listen, but I made a commitment to myself to show up every week on a different format, come hell or high water, come wind, rain, hail and shine. I would, because I know that's a superpower of mine. I'll just get it done if I commit to it, despite how hard it will be. And I've probably set myself this, end of the 2021 to kind of go, okay, now time to review, to go, all right, do I continue? Do I continue the same way? Do I continue to do a different way? Do I drop it? Do I see what else it means? And so I'm trying not to judge too quickly, but not just going to continue choicelessly ad infinitum. So I completely relate to what you've just said. I mean, I need to set my own medicine right, because I'm a big, I've got better at not listening to that voice at 5 o'clock in the morning, that voice at 5 or 3 in the morning. I mean, at least it turns up at pretty much the same time. That's nice of it to be at least consistent. But it's like, oh, hello, right, thanks for your input. We've got a review in a couple of weeks. Stand down, and being clear on what the criteria are for reviewing it.
One of the things I'm sure people that are listening will be interested in, it feels like to me, and I think for most people, that doing stand-up would be one of the hardest things ever. And I think in the job that we do, as facilitators and coaches, it's a great thing to at least experiment with, because it really tests so many things. How do you, because I'm assuming you do, how did you and how do you continue to cope with the nerves, the anxiety when a joke falls flat and it bombs? How do you deal with that?
It's funny, again, it's rather like I was saying at the start of this, that, are you funny is up there with, are you good looking, whatever. That I do find it fascinating how we go, oh, stand-up's the hardest thing in the world. And like basically all you're doing is standing up for 10 minutes, 5 minutes, 10 minutes, or an hour max, right? Or if you're emceeing an evening max. Whereas for most jobs, it's day in, day out. So it fascinates me that we kind of hold it up as being this really hard thing. I look at most jobs and go, holy moly, that's hard. So it's very interesting how we compare ourselves with other people and their roles and usually beat ourselves up. So I'll happily take the glitz and go, yes, it's the hardest thing you can imagine doing. And, so takes a special kind of person, which is nonsense. So I kind of am lucky in that I've anxiety has been side by side with me most of my life. So I'm no stranger to anxiety. So, whether it was, I don't know, taking exams, going to school, changing jobs, everything has been at high level. So to get on stage, that anxiety is normal, right? I'm used to that. That's no. So I think the whole feel the fear and do it anyway if something is important to you. I've learned that you've just got to ride that wave. So yes, there are tricks and tips. So on a perfect gig, I'd make sure I've had some nuts. That for me is the perfect protein. I don't drink too much, that I bite the side of my tongue ever so slightly to get enough kind of water in my mouth, as it were, but don't drink too much, otherwise I'll pee all the time. I'll go for a walk. I'll get some quiet space, and I'll manufacture that by having white noise and headphones. So find somewhere in the venue that I can wander around. I'll try not to look at my content, although that's kind of addictive to do that. And I've got, and breathing is one of the quickest ways, so breathing, standing kind of calmly, breathing, and finding phrases that work for you in your head. For me, for some bizarre reason, it's only a game show, just silly phrases that kind of block out. So they're all kinds of but you're going to feel anxious, right? And then with the dying on your backside, I think that's a really good metaphor for dying on your backside in life, that you can do things to prep. So I've got better at having stock jokes for when something dies. Okay. Or when particular heckles or particular things happen, that you've got stock ways of dealing with that. But I just channel I don't know if you've heard of, there's a UK comic called James Acaster, who I think is brilliant.
So what was his name, Mitch?
James Acaster. And his last show was about having a breakdown, actually, and coming back from that. And he had a breakdown on the Great British Bake Off on telly. So it was a very public kind of thing. And he just talks about it's your job. Messing up is part of the job. It's part of the job. It just is. And I find that infinitely comforting. And I think that's true for life, that you can't avoid it. It's just part of the deal. Yeah. And the addition I would make is, if you avoid it, you're not really living life. Yeah, although I don't know, I have some kind of beef with, I do get the whole, it's when we're uncomfortable, we grow and all the rest of it. But again, maybe it's because I'm someone who's kind of lived with anxiety a lot. I do sometimes think that we have to be really uncomfortable to grow, if that makes sense. So I think just chucking yourself needlessly into stress is sometimes something we do, and kind of confuse it with growth, if that makes sense. Where I was coming from was more that life can be messy. Oh God, yeah. It's rare. Yeah. It's rarely tied up in a bow. Yeah. And if you always want it tied up in a bow, you're probably not really living at the edge. You're not really experiencing the messiness and the beauty and the chaos. Yeah. That's my narrative of what life brings. So I remember reading Brené Brown said, you can't, what was it she said? You can't subjectively numb emotion. So if you do, you got to numb it all. Whereas if you don't, the only way you get to feel the real joy is to feel the real sad. You only get to feel the real happy when you feel the real angst. And almost like feeling it all as opposed to feeling none of it, because you can't subjectively kind of go, I just want to feel happy, not the bad bits. And so that's maybe part of my identity as I live my life in this complete topsy-turvy way of living at the moment. Maybe that's one of my rules that I'm trying to live by, and kind of accepting and expecting those moments. And it's maybe a comfort blanket way of getting through it. No, interesting. I think maybe where I'm coming from is the kind of hero culture. I see it a lot in the corporate world of dun, 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 I'm operating in 12 time zones, and I've got back-to-back meetings, and I'm putting myself out of my comfort zone by doing this promotion to a job that I can't stand, and I'm never going to see my family. I think I see that a lot in my coaching work, and for me, it's like, how can you thrive? There's a whole piece there. But the numbing thing's really interesting, and I think I'm getting better at going, hello emotion, what's the message? Like, it's the dashboard, right? And often it's actually, it's caveman part of my brain, bless you, love you, squeeze you, I can see you're not feeling safe right now, let me reassure you, these are not another tribe with spears, this is the 21st century, and it's just a heckler, and it's all good, and they're not part of our tribe, and I'm not under threat, but thanks for the message, caveman part of my brain, love it.
What a great explanation. I've been chatting to people recently about the distinction between having thoughts or being had by your thoughts.
Yeah.
And what you've described is a perfect way of articulating having thoughts and not being had by them.
Yeah, I talk with my coaches a lot about Trevor the caveman. I don't know why, but with the kids, that's how I articulated it. And I mean, there's all kinds of books, right? Like there's the chimp paradox. There's people describe it differently. But yeah, Trevor the caveman is very chatty in my head. And to mix my metaphors, I also just talk about a kind of sushi bar conveyor belt. Have you ever been to one of those restaurants where they have like sushi on a conveyor belt?
Yeah.
So Trevor the caveman is just producing all these thoughts, a bit like sushi on a conveyor belt. I don't have to pick them up. I don't have to eat the pickled raw tuna. Thanks, Trevor. Oh, it's come around again. Oh, you've been saying that one since 2008. Bless you. Still not going to have it. Thank you. Oh, I've had a nibble again. Oh, putting that one down. Yeah. So.
We've run out a little bit of time. I've got a couple more things I'd like to ask you. I want to pick up on the identity piece. And if anyone's listening that has an inkling, has a seed within them that they'd like to shift their identity, what advice, and I know it's not, here's 3 steps to doing it, here's your top 10 lists, I know it's not as simple as that, but given the shift that you've made and how this is how you see yourself, any advice for someone that currently doesn't see themselves that way but would like to?
I really like Hermione Ibarra is one of my professional crushes. So she writes a lot for Harvard Business Review, and she talks about she's got an article on authenticity, which I found very helpful, about the kind of making it fluid. That the identity sounds so fixed, right? It sounds very digital, on or off, and she's got a much more fluid concept of it. And I quite often use the metaphor of a wardrobe, in that you put on a new pair of shoes and they feel a little bit tight or a little bit weird to go in, and you wear them in and then they're fine, right? Or you've got that really smart outfit that you probably would only wear for a wedding or a big party. You wouldn't wear it every day, but it's cool, it's in the wardrobe. So I think rather than thinking about identity shifts, for me it's about what's helped is go, well, I can get another item in the wardrobe, and then suddenly you look and you go, I've got quite a big wardrobe. So I guess that's unpicking it from a scary word, what I find quite an overwhelming word like identity, and just breaking it back down into like, for this occasion I can do this, I can wear that.
And who was the author, H?
Ibarra, Ibarra, Hermione Ibarra.
Okay, cool. Is it harder for a woman in stand-up?
I think it was.
Right.
I have, direct experiences of, we've already got a woman on the bill, love. So, won't have you tonight. But are women funny? Women aren't funny. Oh, you're quite funny for a girl. And also being in the green room or being backstage and having male comics eviscerate women on stage. So that was my experience probably 10, 15 years ago. I would like to think that has shifted massively. I mean, that's come back to your identity piece, the role models out there. It's much more, if you'd said 15 years ago, name a female comic, I think people would run, whereas now you could reel off, a whole bunch. I think that the role model thing makes it easier to step into that identity as well.
Cool. Why don't we pause there? I've got a few kind of quick fire questions to throw at you if you're happy to take part in that. The first one's an obvious one for me. Who's your favorite comic?
I don't like choosing favorites. I find that limiting and annoying. So if you ask me that question tomorrow, I'd probably give it a different answer. So James Acaster is definitely up there. But then, as are a gazillion other people, David Mitchell, Lee Mack, and all.
I remember Lee Mack on, I think it was Graham Norton, telling his Butlins story.
Okay.
And I have never laughed so much in my life. Anyway, separate conversation. Favorite word in the English language?
Can I have two? Sesquipedalian pleonast.
Okay, is that one word or two?
That's two words, and it's someone who uses too many long words unnecessarily.
Oh, gold.
How cool is that?
That's gold.
My mum was an English teacher who kept a dictionary in the car to while away boring times. Just throwing that out there.
A book that's changed your life?
Ooh, book that's changed my life. Right. To be honest, Jilly Cooper, Harriet, all right, which is the most trashy Mills and Boon crud. But if at any low point in my life when you need to just absorb yourself in something cotton wool, I know every word of that book. So I think we underestimate the power of something that's utterly absorbing and mind-numbing. And also, actually, now reading it, it is a hilarious deconstruction of misogyny in the 1970s. Discuss.
Wow. And a rule you live your life by?
Rule I live my life by. Wow. Gosh, I think I just make it up as I go along. I'm not sure I have any rules I live my life by.
That's the rule. I'll make it up as I go along.
I want to say something really profound and meaningful. I think it's funny. My where there's on the kids' school at the door as you go in, it's got a quote by John Wesley, which is, do all the good you can to all the people you can, all the ways you can, yada yada yada. And I think it's just be kind. Really, at the end of the day.
Well, I think that's a perfect way to pause. H, thank you so much for your time, and great. There's been no Mexican wave of construction going on next door.
No, the builders are having a day off. Very exciting. Well, thanks for having me on, Pete. That was really good fun.
You're welcome. Enjoyed it. Speak soon.